This science fiction story begins in a future where humanity has advanced significantly in space exploration. Humans no longer just ruled Earth but had established their dominance over multiple planets across the universe. Their technology had progressed to the point where they could travel at the speed of light. However, as humanity continued to develop, feelings of aggression and conflict grew within them. Many groups had formed that sought to dominate by eliminating others. Because of this, wars erupted between different continents. There was hardly any planet left where humans had not established colonies. These colonies provided them with premium resources from various planets, which they used for further advancements. Even though Earth had become highly advanced for humans, it suffered from a lack of resources. To compensate, they extracted resources from other planets. Here, we are introduced to a woman named Orlin, whose father, Sidon, was a powerful political leader. Sidon once ruled a vast empire across the universe, but he had many enemies who eventually attacked him and seized his power. Among all planets in the universe, Arcus was the most valuable because it contained a rare resource called melang beneath its surface. This resource could be used as an unlimited fuel source. Because of this, many powerful entities were engaged in a fierce battle to gain control over Arcus and its resources. The inhabitants of Arcus were known as freemen. Any army or ruler that governed Arcus subjected the freemen to extreme torture. They were treated like slaves, forced to extract resources from the planet. Arcus was a dangerous planet, as its land was home to massive creatures. The freemen believed that one day, a man would come to liberate them from their suffering, allowing them to live freely without serving anyone. However, such a savior had not yet arrived, and they continued to wait for him. Previously, a group called Atleti ruled over Arcus, but they were overthrown by another faction. Now, we see a woman named Jessica and her son, Paul, who are also on this planet. To survive, they take refuge among the freemen and begin living among them, as the current rulers of Arcus pose a great threat to them. They were extremely cruel and never hesitated to kill any of the freemen. However, Paul was different from the rest because he had the ability to see glimpses of the future. He could get visions of what was about to happen. Recently, Paul had seen a vision of himself fighting for the freemen and doing whatever it took to ensure their rights. So, Paul and Jessica decided to join a group of freemen who were dedicated to freeing their people. Together, they prepared to fight against the ruling entity on this planet. Currently, a dangerous man named Harklin was the king of this entire region. He had a massive army and used giant machines to extract metal resources. However, Harklin was aware that a group of freemen was rising against him. To crush them, he sent several soldiers to the northern part of the planet to eliminate the rebel freemen. Paul and Jessica were part of that rebel group and were highly skilled warriors. Without wasting time, they launched an attack on one of the metal extraction machines. But soon, Harklin's soldiers arrived. As soon as they saw the freemen, they launched an attack. Paul, Jessica, and the others fought back with full force, as this was part of their plan. Paul was battling numerous soldiers when suddenly, a soldier attempted to attack him from behind. However, Jessica reacted swiftly and killed the soldier before he could harm Paul. The group managed to defeat one of Harklin's forces, but then came an unexpected revelation. Jessica told Paul that she was pregnant. Since both of them had the ability to see the future, they already knew that she was going to have a daughter. Paul constantly worried about his mother's safety because they were surrounded by enemies. He knew that they all had to stay united, otherwise, their enemies would attack and kill them. Meanwhile, the freemen began extracting water from the dead soldiers' bodies. The reason behind this was that the planet Arcus was extremely hot, with very little water available. There were no trees or plants, making water a rare and precious resource. Because of these harsh conditions, the people living on Arcus used a special type of suit that could collect and recycle their sweat and urine to conserve water. They filtered and purified the extracted liquid into drinkable water. This is why they collected water from the bodies of the dead soldiers, as it was a resource they could use. On this planet, Arcus, water was as precious as nectar. After taking what they needed, they left the dead soldiers behind. However, a small device was left at the site, emitting a strange sound. It turned out that the device was a signal to summon a massive underground creature. A giant tentacled creature emerged from beneath the ground and pulled the dead soldiers into its depths. Meanwhile, the leader of the freemen, named Still, was heading toward their hidden base. After years of effort, their settlement was finally fully established. When Still encountered Paul and Jessica, he recognized them and decided to take them along with his group. On the other side, we are introduced to one of the rulers of the Harklin Empire, a king named Rabban. At the moment, Rabban controlled a large portion of the Arcus planet. Rabban was extremely troubled because he had received reports that, in the northern region, a group of freemen was attacking his soldiers. They had even destroyed the machines used to extract metal, disrupting resource collection. He needed to find a solution quickly, or else he would lose control. Rabin was growing increasingly frustrated because he did not want to show any weakness in front of his enemies. Meanwhile, Still and the other Freemen arrived at their hidden refuge, where many members of the Freeman community were living in secrecy. When Jessica and Paul were introduced to the group, not everyone welcomed them. Some Freemen believed that they were a threat, while others saw Paul as the prophesied savior who would lead them to freedom. The senior female leaders of the Freemen confronted Still, asking why he had brought Paul and Jessica to their hideout. Still firmly stated that they had received messages indicating that Paul was their chosen one, their Messiah. Hearing this, many of the Freeman women laughed at Still and mocked the idea. However, they ultimately agreed to move forward according to the plan. Paul gradually began integrating himself into the community. Meanwhile, they learned that one of their team members had died during the battle. The Freemen held a funeral for their fallen friend, honoring him in their own way. They extracted all the water from the body and poured it into a reservoir. This reservoir was located inside their hidden area and contained a large amount of water. Still took Jessica to this reservoir and explained, "Whenever someone from our group dies, we collect the water from their bodies and store it here." Jessica tried to estimate how many lives must have been lost to gather so much water. Still continued, "Even if we die, we will never drink this water. For us, it is sacred." Still then told Jessica about their spiritual leader, a guru who had guided them all. Like Jessica, she also had the ability to see the future. However, their guru had recently passed away, and now they needed a new leader. Still then made a shocking proposal. He asked Jessica to become their new guru. However, if she refused, she would be killed, and her body's water would be added to the reservoir. Of course, Jessica did not want to die, so she agreed to become their guru. But the process was extremely dangerous. She would have to drink a sacred blue liquid, which was highly poisonous. If her body could digest it, she would survive and become their guru. If not, she would die. The next day, Jessica was given the blue liquid. Shortly after drinking it, she lost consciousness. Later, everyone discovered that Jessica was pregnant. She was experiencing intense pain in her stomach. When Paul learned about this, he became extremely worried for his mother. Many of the Freemen were against Still's decision to make Jessica their guru. However, the good news was that Jessica regained consciousness. She had survived. This meant she had successfully become their guru. Paul immediately went to see his mother and asked about her well-being. But Jessica's behavior had changed. She told Paul, "You must drink the blue liquid as well. It will reveal the truth, something I cannot explain in words." Meanwhile, Jessica's unborn child was completely healthy and, surprisingly, was already communicating with Jessica from the womb. Paul felt somewhat relieved. He then went to meet the rest of the Freemen. A woman named Cheney spent a lot of time with Paul. It was becoming clear that they liked each other. Paul and Cheney, along with their team, had to move forward through the desert while avoiding the dangerous creatures lurking beneath the sand. Their main mission was to destroy all the machines that were extracting metals from the planet. During this mission, the bond between Paul and Cheney grew even stronger. They were beginning to develop feelings for each other. Meanwhile, Jessica, who was now officially their guru, spent most of her time communicating with her unborn child. Jessica was preparing her child for the future and explained, "If we want to survive, we must make everyone believe that Paul is their Messiah." And these things were not going to happen all at once, so Jessica started focusing on those people who did not believe in them. On the other hand, Paul, along with the Freemen, began destroying all the massive machines that were used to collect metals. Due to such large-scale destruction, all the machines were rendered useless. Obviously, if there were no machines, metal could not be extracted. All the Freemen were astonished by Paul's abilities because he was incredibly agile. After completing their mission for the day, everyone gathered to celebrate the moment. Stilgar kept praising Paul because he had always believed that Paul was their Messiah. The better Paul performed, the more accurate Stilgar's predictions seemed to be. The people there began calling Paul by another name, which was very famous. It was the name of a small desert creature that evolved its food and drink to survive. Paul was becoming very comfortable with all these things and, alongside the Freemen, destroyed even more machines. When Rabin and the Baron learned about this, they became extremely furious because the extraction of metals had come to a complete halt. The Baron told Rabin that he had to do something immediately, otherwise, their ability to extract metals would be lost forever. If the enemies continued to destroy the machines in this way, their dominance would collapse. Rabin was enraged, and he knew it was the work of the Freeman team. Determined to eliminate them at any cost, he set out on his mission. Meanwhile, Paul was shown watching Stilgar, who was riding a massive desert creature. While people from other planets were terrified of these creatures, the Freemen saw them as no big deal. In fact, the Freemen knew how to control the creatures by manipulating a sensitive part of their bodies. They used these enormous desert creatures as vehicles to travel from one place to another. After a while, Cheney approached Paul. Paul also needed to learn how to ride these massive creatures, but Cheney told him that Stilgar would not teach him. At this moment, Paul began telling Cheney about his own planet. Paul spoke about the vast oceans and the abundance of trees and plants from where he came. However, Cheney had never seen such things because she had grown up on this planet, where there were no trees or plants at all. Cheney told Paul that he was still not a true Freeman because his blood had not yet changed. But now, Paul wanted to stay with Cheney and become a Freeman himself. They shared many loving moments and grew closer to each other. One night, Paul had a strange dream. In his dream, he saw that many Freemen had died due to starvation, as they had no water left to sustain their lives. He woke up in a panic, knowing that this vision would eventually come true. However, he had not yet told his mother, Jessica, about the dream because he did not want to cause unnecessary panic. Meanwhile, Jessica, who had now become the spiritual leader of the Freemen, wanted to manipulate them into believing that Paul would save them. She reinforced the prophecy that had been foretold for years, that Paul was their Messiah. On the other hand, Paul continued destroying machines with the Freemen in the northern region, and the area was almost completely cleared. Finally, Paul told Stilgar that he wanted to learn how to ride the giant desert creature. Stilgar did not refuse. Instead, he directly took Paul into the desert. All the Freemen gathered to watch the event because no one had ever successfully learned to ride the creature on their first attempt. Many of them were likely ready to laugh at Paul's failure. Stilgar explained to Paul that he needed to use vibrations to attract the creature. Even if Paul failed, he would still be their Messiah. Paul then moved into the center of the desert and began generating vibrations. However, this time, he created such intense vibrations that the largest creature emerged, a massive worm-like beast, the biggest and most dangerous of its kind. No Freeman had ever been able to control it. Without hesitation, Paul leaped onto the creature's back as it moved at an incredible speed. Initially, he struggled greatly, but eventually, he identified the right spot and managed to control it. Stilgar and all the other Freemen cheered for Paul, realizing that he might truly be their savior. No one was happier than Jessica. Since everything Jessica had predicted was coming true, she began spreading the word even more forcefully that Paul would be the one to save them all. Essentially, Jessica was manipulating the Freemen into believing that Paul was the prophesied savior. All the Freemen had returned to their tribe after clearing out the northern region. However, Paul did not like how his mother was misleading the Freemen with exaggerated stories. He did not want her to deceive them because there was a possibility that he was not the chosen one of the prophecy. But Jessica was not going to stop. Instead, she now sent the Freemen south after securing the northern area. Paul, however, chose not to go south with the Freemen forces. He feared that if he did, the vision he had seen in his dreams might come true, many Freemen warriors could die. He could only hope that everyone would remain safe and complete their mission successfully. As the Freemen continued destroying machines, rendering the entire northern region empty, Rabban realized he could not afford to sit back any longer. He gathered a massive army and set out to attack the Freemen. His forces advanced north, where the Freemen were stationed. However, when Rabban and his army arrived, they realized it had been a trap. The Freemen launched a surprise attack on them. Since Rabban had not prepared for this ambush, many of his soldiers were killed. However, he managed to escape, as he valued his own life above all else. He desperately wanted to rule Arrakis forever, and for that, he needed to survive. Meanwhile, Irulan was seen alongside her father, Shaddam. By now, everyone on the planet had come to know about Paul as the supposed Messiah. There was no one unaware of the prophecy, and many now expected Paul to fulfill it. Shaddam grew increasingly anxious, realizing that if things continued this way, he could lose his power entirely. However, his daughter, Irulan, advised him against killing Paul. She warned that if they killed him now, he would become immortalized in history. Instead, she suggested they let things play out naturally, and whoever survived the final battle would be their true competitor. By defeating that person, they could reclaim their power. At this point, a priestess named Helen, who worked for them and often provided guidance on right and wrong, warned that the Freemen were relentlessly destroying Rabban and Baron's machines. If their machines were completely wiped out, their entire production would come to a halt. Helen then predicted that Rabban's younger brother, Fade, would ultimately take over the throne. However, Irulan was shocked at this idea, exclaiming that Fade was utterly ruthless and filled with madness. But this was exactly what Helen had predicted, and perhaps it would turn out to be true in the future. Now, we see Fade, who was so dangerous that he ate human flesh. Killing someone was a completely normal thing for him. Today was his 40th birthday, and he was celebrating it. On this occasion, he had organized a brutal competition, not for survival but for slaughter. Fate had brought some members of the old empire, the Atreides, into the battleground. Without hesitation, he entered the battle arena and started killing them because he wanted to punish them. However, among them was a doctor, who turned out to be stronger than expected. The doctor fought back fiercely, pushing Fade back. But Fade was not someone who would accept defeat so easily. Baron Harkonnen was sitting on his throne, watching everything unfold, but he did not intervene to stop the fight. Meanwhile, Helen and several of her prophetic followers were also watching the competition closely. The doctor put up a tough fight against Fade, but in the end, Fade killed him and won the competition. Afterward, Fade went straight to his uncle, Baron Harkonnen, and asked what message he had for him. The Baron made it clear that his older brother, Rabban, was failing to maintain control. Because of this, Rabban would be replaced, and Fade would be made the new ruler of the entire planet. Fade was overjoyed by this news and immediately set off to claim his kingdom. Meanwhile, on the other side, several harvesting machines were shown arriving to extract precious metals. They came in a massive group, wreaking havoc everywhere. But the Freemen had anticipated this and were ready to attack. Paul was leading the Freeman forces, but when he confronted the enemy, he was shocked to see an old friend, Gurney. Gurney had once been close to Paul, but due to unfortunate circumstances, he had been forced to join the enemy and was now in charge of controlling the harvesting machines. Both Paul and Gurney wanted the same thing, freedom. Their common enemy was the Harkonnens. Gurney then revealed to Paul that there were hidden mines on the planet, containing highly advanced weapons. If they could access this arsenal, they could turn the tide of the war. Paul was thrilled by this information, so he immediately set off with Gurney to the weapons depot. Once they reached it, they found an enormous stockpile of weapons and explosives, which gave the Freemen a renewed sense of hope. They could actually win this war. The Freemen began to regroup to defend themselves and prepare for a counterattack. However, it was then revealed that Fade had launched a massive attack on the southern region with his powerful army. Using machines, he started bombing the entire Freeman group. Many Freemen were severely injured, including Paul himself. Seeing this devastating loss, the Freemen decided to retreat back to their tribe. For the first time, Paul and his allies had suffered a major defeat. Jessica is shown continuously imparting spiritual knowledge to the people. It is revealed that a blue liquid is extracted from the bodies of small creatures, and Jessica instructs a man to give it to her son. Although this blue liquid could only be consumed by females, if a male drank it, he would die. Jessica had complete faith in her son. When Paul returns to his base with his army, he is given the blue liquid. He immediately loses consciousness for a while. Seeing this, Janie rushes to wake Paul up and warns everyone that if anything happens to him, none of them will be spared. Janie tries hard to revive Paul, and after some time, he regains consciousness. Witnessing this miracle, everyone kneels before Paul, as no male had ever survived after drinking the blue liquid. From the southern to the northern regions, people had now begun to accept Paul as their messiah. Paul, aware of everything, prepares everyone for war. Even though their numbers are small, they must fight. He delivers an inspiring speech, demonstrating the qualities of a powerful leader. All of the Freemen stand with Paul, ready to battle against King Cedon. Meanwhile, Cedon and his daughter Raylene receive news that Paul is still alive. Until now, they had believed that Paul had perished along with Atreides. However, it seems all the prophecies are coming true. Knowing that Paul will certainly attack them, Cedon assembles a massive army. But his biggest mistake is underestimating Paul and the Freemen. Although the Freemen are fewer in number, they have massive creatures and fearless soldiers. At Paul's signal, they unleash numerous weapons obtained from the secret base. The explosions are so powerful that half of Cedon's army is obliterated instantly. Seizing the opportunity, Paul's team launches an attack on the enemies. Within a short time, Cedon's vast army is significantly weakened. The Freemen execute Paul's strategy perfectly, translating it into victory. Paul infiltrates the enemy stronghold, kills Baron, and captures King Cedon and his daughter. However, even in captivity, Cedon warns Paul that he is making a grave mistake. Cedon has numerous supporters who assist him, and he believes that soon, his massive army will arrive to wipe out Paul and his forces. But Paul was confident that everyone would listen to him. Even if it was just a story that he was a messiah, as a leader, his words would carry weight, and everyone would accept his rule. Wade had also arrived at the scene, but there was no way he would let Paul take his place. Meanwhile, Reban had already been killed, meaning Wade was the only remaining contender. Wade directly challenged Paul to a fight because only the one who survived would rule. Wade believed that no warrior was better than him, but as he fought Paul, he realized that defeating him would not be easy. Gradually, Paul started dominating the battle, dealing heavy damage to Wade. Eventually, Paul killed Wade, making him the sole surviving member eligible to rule Planet Rex. He was now the new king, destined to take control of the entire region. However, Paul had one obligation: if he wanted to be the ruler, he had to marry Sidon's daughter, Raylene. Paul accepted this condition, which deeply angered Chaney. She felt betrayed by Paul and, in her fury, left for an unknown destination. Although Paul had now secured control over the planet, there were still others who might try to seize power, something Paul was not fully aware of yet. And with that, our story comes to an end.